The Battle of Shiloh, also known as the Battle of Pittsburgh Landing, was a major battle in the Western Theater of the American Civil War, fought April 6–7, 1862, in southwestern Tennessee. A Union army under Major General Ulysses S. Grant had moved via the Tennessee River deep into Tennessee and was encamped, principally at Pittsburgh Landing, Tennessee, on the west bank of the river, where Confederate forces under Generals Albert Sidney Johnston and Pierre G. T. Beauregard launched a surprise attack on Grant's army. Johnston was killed in action during the fighting. Beauregard, who thus succeeded to command of the army, decided against pressing the attack late in the evening. Overnight, Grant received considerable reinforcements from another Union army under Maj. Gen. Don Carlos Buell, allowing him to launch an unexpected counterattack the next morning which completely reversed the Confederate gains of the previous day. On April 6, the first day of the battle, the Confederates struck with the intention of driving the Union defenders away from the river and into the swamps of Owl Creek to the west. Johnston hoped to defeat Grant's Army of the Tennessee before the anticipated arrival of General Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio. The Confederate battle lines became confused during the fierce fighting, and Grant's men instead fell back to the northeast, in the direction of Pittsburgh Landing, a Union position on a slightly sunken road, nicknamed the Hornet's Nest, defended by the men of Brig. Gens. Benjamin M. Prentiss and William H. Wallace was mortally wounded at Shiloh, while Prentiss was eventually surrounded and surrendered. General Johnstone was shot in the leg and bled to death while personally leading an attack. Beauregard, his second-in-command, acknowledged how tired the army was from the day's exertions and decided against assaulting the final Union position that night. Reinforcements from Buell's army and a division of Grant's army arrived in the evening of April 6 and helped turn the tide the next morning, when the Union commanders launched a counterattack along the entire line. Confederate forces were forced to retreat from the area, ending their hopes of blocking the Union advance into northern Mississippi. The Battle of Shiloh was the bloodiest battle in American history up to that time, although it was superseded the next year by the Battle of Chancellorsville. Background and plans. After the losses of Fort Henry and Fort Donelson in February 1862, Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnston withdrew his forces into western Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and Alabama to reorganize. Johnston established his base at Corinth, Mississippi, the site of a major railroad junction and strategic transportation link between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mississippi River, but left the Union troops with access into southern Tennessee and points farther south via the Tennessee River. In early March, Union Maj. Gen. Henry W. Halleck, then commander of the Department of the Missouri, ordered Grant to remain at Fort Henry, and on March 4 turned field command of the expedition over to a subordinate, Brig. Gen. C.F. Smith, who had recently been nominated as a major general. Smith's orders were to lead raids intended to capture or damage the railroads in southwestern Tennessee. Brig. Gen. William T. Sherman's troops arrived from Paducah, Kentucky, to conduct a similar mission to break the railroads near Eastport, Mississippi. Halleck also ordered Grant to advance his Army of West Tennessee on an invasion up the Tennessee River. Grant left Fort Henry and headed upriver, arriving at Savannah, Tennessee, on March 14, and established his headquarters on the east bank of the river. Grant's troops set up camp farther upriver, 5 divisions at Pittsburgh Landing, Tennessee, and a 6th at Crump's Landing, 4 miles from Grant's headquarters. Meanwhile, Halleck's command was enlarged through consolidation of Grant's and Buell's armies and renamed the Department of the Mississippi. With Buell's Army of the Ohio under his command, Halleck ordered Buell to concentrate with Grant at Savannah. Buell began a march with much of his army from Nashville, Tennessee, and headed southwest towards Savannah. Halleck intended to take the field in person and lead both armies in an advance south to seize Corinth, Mississippi. where the Mobile and Ohio Railroad linking Mobile, Alabama, to the Ohio River intersected the Memphis and Charleston Railroad. The railroad was a vital supply line connecting the Mississippi River Valley to Memphis, Tennessee, and Richmond, Virginia. Opposing forces and initial movements. Union Grant's Army of the Tennessee of 48,894 men consisted of 6 divisions, led by Maj. Gens. John A. McClernand and Lew Wallace, and Brig. Gens. W. H. L. Wallace, Stephen A. Hurlbut, William T. Sherman, and Benjamin M. Prentiss. Of the 6 divisions encamped on the western side of the Tennessee River in early April, only Lew Wallace's 3rd Division was at Crump's Landing. The remainder were farther south at Pittsburgh Landing. Grant developed a reputation during the war for being more concerned with his own plans than with those of the enemy. His encampment at Pittsburgh Landing displayed his most consequential lack of such concern. His army was spread out in bivouac style, with many of his men surrounding a small, log meeting house named Shiloh Church, passing the time waiting for Buell's army with drills for his many raw troops, without establishing entrenchments or other significant defensive measures. In his memoirs, Grant reacted to criticism of his lack of entrenchments. Besides this, the troops with me, officers and men, needed discipline and drill more than they did experience with the pick, shovel and axe. Under all these circumstances I concluded that drill and discipline were worth more to our men than fortifications. Lew Wallace's division was 5 miles downstream from Pittsburgh Landing, at Crump's Landing, a position intended to prevent the placement of Confederate river batteries, to protect the road connecting Crump's Landing to Bethel Station, Tennessee, and to guard the Union Army's right flank. In addition, Wallace's troops could strike the railroad line connecting Bethel Station to Corinth, about 20 miles to the south. On April 5, the eve of battle, the first of Buell's divisions, under the command of Brig. Gen. William Bull Nelson, reached Savannah. Grant instructed Nelson to encamp there instead of immediately crossing the river. The remainder of Buell's army, still marching toward Savannah with only portions of 4 of his divisions, totaling 17,918 men, did not reach the area in time to have a significant role in the battle until its second day. Buell's 3 other divisions were led by Brig. Gens. Alexander M. McCook, Thomas L. Crittenden, and Thomas J. Wood. Confederate. On the Confederate side, Johnston named his newly assembled force the Army of Mississippi. He concentrated almost 55,000 men around Corinth, Mississippi, about 20 miles southwest of Grant's troops at Pittsburgh Landing. Of these men, 44,699 departed from Corinth on April 3, hoping to surprise Grant before Buell arrived to join forces. They were organized into 4 large corps, commanded by Maj. Gen. Leonidas Polk, with 2 divisions under Brig. Gen. Charles Clark and Maj. Gen. Benjamin F. Cheatham, Maj. Gen. Braxton Bragg, with 2 divisions under Brig. Gens. Daniel Ruggles and Jones M. Withers, Maj. Gen. William J. Hardy, with 3 brigades under Brig. Gens. Thomas C. Hindman, Patrick Cleburne, and Sterling A. M. Wood. Brig. Gen. John C. Breckinridge, in reserve, with 3 brigades under Coles, Robert Trabue and Winfield S. Statham, and Brig. Gen. John S. Bowen, and detached cavalry. On the eve of battle, Grant's and Johnston's armies were of comparable size, but the Confederates were poorly armed with antique weapons, including shotguns, hunting rifles, pistols, flintlock muskets, and even a few pikes. However, some regiments, notably the 6th and 7th Kentucky Infantry, had Enfield rifles. The troops approached the battle with very little combat experience. Braxton Bragg's men from Pensacola and Mobile were the best trained. Grant's army included 32 out of 62 infantry regiments who had combat experience at Fort Donelson. One half of his artillery batteries and most of his cavalry were also combat veterans. Johnston's plan was to attack Grant's left, separate the Union Army from its gunboats, support an avenue of retreat on the Tennessee River, and drive it west into the swamps of Snake and Owl Creeks, where it could be destroyed. The attack on Grant was originally planned for April 4, but it was delayed 48 hours due to heavy rain. As a result, Johnston's second-in-command, G.T. Beauregard, again feared that the element of surprise had been lost and recommended withdrawing to Corinth. But Johnston once more refused to consider retreat. Beauregard was concerned that the sounds of marching and the Confederate soldiers test firing their rifles after 2 days of rain had cost him the element of surprise. Beauregard urged Johnston not to attack Grant. "In the struggle tomorrow we shall be fighting men of our own blood, Western men, who understand the use of firearms. The struggle will be a desperate one." P.G.T. Beauregard Johnston, who refused to accept Beauregard's advice, made the decision to attack and then remarked, "I would fight them if they were a million." Despite Beauregard's well-founded concern, most of the Union forces did not hear the marching army approach and were unaware of the enemy camps less than 3 miles away.